Energist podcast is brought to you by NRJ Media Group.
So today, I have the pleasure and the personal honor of welcoming our guest, Rob Hollocks, a former Paramount Pictures studio executive and now writer, producer, and director of his own production company, which I'll let him explain the clever name. Join me in welcoming Rob to our show.
Thank you for coming. Lovely to have you on.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's exciting.
Lovely to meet you as well.
Yeah, likewise.
Okay, so full transparency, Rob was my former boss at Paramount Pictures and great mentor of mine. Rob, you knew you were my mentor, didn't you?
That's very kind
Okay.
of you to say. Yeah.
You're like, did you know? I've been so amazed at your career, not only as...
So have I.
So have you?
Yeah.
I mean, everything that you've done, because when we work at Studio World, many of us, a lot of us will not admit, we all want to pursue a creative field as well, right? Getting involved on the business side introduces us to the creative, and we get to work on different movies and TV shows, and many of us wish we were writers and directors and producers.
Right.
And you actually did it.
Eventually, yes.
Yes, but you did. And you were at Paramount Pictures for a good amount of time.
Yeah, I think it was 14 years, something like that.
14 years?
Yeah,
And you work both sides of the pond as well. So you work in London
started
and
in the
here.
UK and worked on the UK. At that time, initially, there were a joint venture with Universal. So I started working for the Paramount side back in, I don't know, whenever it was, in Hammersmith in London. And then when they decided to move the international office back to the US, I came for, originally it was going to be, I'll do it for a year and then I'll go back. And that was 20 years ago now. So, yeah.
But it must have been a hell of a move too.
It was a big decision. I mean, I initially wasn't sure about it, and I turned it down initially and wasn't sure if I wanted to go out there. I had a young family at the time, and you know, it was a lot of upheaval. But we came out, and you know, originally planned to say just do it for a year, and then you know, ended up staying for 3, and then 5, and then so on and so on. Then went on to do other things. Yeah, it was a huge change, but it, you know, my kids particularly, they spent more of their time here in the US than they were in England now. So it's kind of it's been an interesting life, that's for sure.
Can I ask, where did you start? How did a passion for film and television, where did it come from?
It's from a really early age, to be honest with you. I mean, one of the earliest memories I have, and this could explain why I make the films I do, but my mum used to love horror movies, the really old school.
Wait, your
Universal.
mother?
Oh yeah, she loved Dracula, Frank.
Oh,
and
what a cool mom.
Yeah, but I wasn't allowed to stay up and see them. So I'd come down in the morning for breakfast, getting ready for school, and while I was having my breakfast or whatever, she'd be telling me all about these movies, and she's a great storyteller, and it was about the curtains open, the stagecoach is rushing through the mountains, and you know, and she'd tell me the story of Dracula or Frankenstein or whatever, and I'd just love it, and I'd sit there just eating my porridge, and I think that's kind of one of my earliest memories, and because of her, I think she loved movies. Her 2 favourite movies were The Sound of Music and Psycho. Just kind of an interesting
You could see how they would sit quite nicely together.
Exactly.
Your mom must have been one hell of a storyteller,
She was
though.
great.
Your bedtime stories were really fun
were
or
really
scary.
Cool. Yeah, they kept me up a few times, but that's kind of how it started. And then I remember just enjoying movies at a really early age. Love films. One of the first movies that really struck me was the original King Kong, you know, the 1933 one, and just seeing that as a little kid, and I was just like, wow, this is incredible. And, you know, just grew up on those sorts of movies. I particularly love fantasy movies, like all the Harryhausen movies and stuff like that. I grew up with all those sort of things. And I think it was about 18 or 20 when I saw the first Indiana Jones movie, and that changed my life, really. I love Star Wars, but Indy was always my favourite. And seeing that, I remember going to a movie cinema in a place called Slough by myself and watching it 4 times back to back, and just couldn't get over how great it was. And that's kind of, you know, I always love movies.
This is Raiders, yes?
Raiders, yeah, the very first one, yeah. Just, you know, and I've been passionate about them ever since. And I guess, you know, I started out in traditional marketing, really. My background was kind of brand marketing and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I worked for a couple of big companies in the UK, and then happened to see a job. Paramount were looking for a Star Trek brand manager. And I applied for that. The rest is history, really. That's kind of how it started.
Oh, I didn't know you started working on Star Trek.
Yeah. They brought me in. I was going to be working on Paramount stuff. So it was Star Trek and their feature films. And the guy who interviewed me sort of said, okay, we've got this movie coming out called Forrest Gump. Go see it. I want you to tell me what you think of it. So I went to see Forrest Gump, sitting in the cinema by myself watching this movie. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. And, you know, just very fortunate. Good time. It was the first movie I worked on. And then I worked on all the Star Trek stuff. And, you know, Deep Space Nine and
But then you moved to the U.S., so this was in the U.K., right?
Yeah, that was in the UK originally. Yeah.
And how was the transition moving to the U.S.?
Actually, surprisingly, it was much easier than I thought. I always liked America. I'd come over a lot for visits, business visits and stuff. Wasn't sure if I could live here, but when they closed the office in London, brought it back to the US, I think they brought about 4 of us. So it was Phil and his team, and we had to just recruit from scratch and bring in new people and everything, which is how I met Norma. I always thought she was amazing from your interview and just such a great part of the team.
I don't know what bullshit I said.
No, come on, you were great. You were amazing, and you always were, and you had such great potential. And yeah, it was fun. I got to build an international marketing team based out of the studio there, and we had a good few years. We had some great results and a great team of people, mostly. You know who I mean.
Yeah, I know.
And we had a great time, and we traveled all over the world, going to territories, seeing how they would market movies in different territories and stuff. And
our annual meetings, because every year we had an annual meeting, and it would mostly be in London. It'll be in London.
In London,
right?
We had a couple. We did one in Mexico, in Cabo.
The Mexico
the
one. So
Cabo.
we would have all the top 12 territories of their MD, the head of finance, their marketing. I think those were the 3 representatives, right?
Yeah.
From around the world, and would have them present their strategy plan, and then we would also present their strategy plan.
Yeah, we talk about what we had coming up.
The upcoming slate, so they knew and they could prepare. But those meetings were one of my memorable, events, because when you're around the table I always felt like we were like the United Nations, right?
It was a bit like that, wasn't it?
And
Probably better organised as well.
And more fun.
More fun because it always happened where the French were always made fun of, right? The Brits, and then...
excuse me, you got 2 Brits here.
It was a little bit.
Culturally, everyone would just be, pushing buttons. But more importantly, it was almost a State of the Union where we were all together, and it was this camaraderie because
it was a lot of fun.
We had a number to meet, right? And where maybe one territory didn't do so well, they put pressure on the other territory. But at the end of the day, we were sharing ideas. And that was one thing, Rob, that you did really, really well. You were really good at, instilling collaboration amongst everybody. And having us all work together, because those are a lot of countries that you were responsible for.
But it's so important, I think. There's everybody's too often in companies, particularly, everybody gets siloed. They're in their little boxes and they work together. And it's almost like, I always joke about it being like Flash Gordon. It's like Ming the Merciless. He likes to set everybody against each other so he can rule.
It's tribalism.
And, exactly. And but with these guys, they're a great bunch, and they had a lot of good ideas. And the interesting thing for me coming over to the US, which is such a huge market, is that when you look at the international markets, they're all so different. So stuff that works here won't work in Southern Europe or Northern Europe or Scandinavia or whatever. And you have to tweak and change everything to make it work in those markets. And we really tried really hard to make sure those guys had a say in what they did. We were able to formulate plans that worked for them, and stuff wasn't just imposed on them. Because very often you'd get something and be like, hey, this is how we're going to market it across the world. And that's not going to work in Japan, for example.
Exactly, or Korea.
They don't like horror movies. They're like this. They like that. There's all these different nuances. So it was really fascinating as well, working with all these different cultures and going to see these people and understanding how their markets worked. It was just...
It must be like being in a bubble, for that time you were there, because you're almost cut off from the outside world. You're living in your own world. Selling stories, basically. Selling films to other countries. It must have been an amazing feeling.
And we were at a great time.
We had so many great
stories.
Is this the one where you told me that someone was talking?
No.
Oh my God, I shouldn't say it. Wasn't Rob.
No, it wasn't Rob. No, but it was fun because, outside of just a camaraderie, right? And we became friends and we were a family.
Yeah. When you watch say, Star Wars or a Star Trek film, if you're a fan, you're a fan. You can enjoy it, whatever. Why do you think there is such a cultural difference in every country, how you market? Japan I could take, as I understand, but France, Germany, Spain might be different to the UK, to the US. Why do you think it is just so different, or you have to market so differently?
I think it really comes down to the culture, I think, because there's so many little nuances. A good example is, actually horror is a great example of that. Horror films, that religious-based horror does really well in religious countries, so like Catholic-based countries like Italy, Spain, They do really well with that. South America. It doesn't work so well in other markets. Germany, it's huge in for some reason. I don't know why, but they also love science fiction, And things like Star Trek, another good example. In certain markets, it just resonates with them, like Germany, some of the European markets, the UK, Australia, that kind of thing, but just didn't work in other markets. That didn't work in places like Spain and Italy. They didn't care. They didn't have the history behind it, and all that kind of stuff. And it's hard to explain. I think it really does come down to a lot of cultural nuances that we maybe don't realise sometimes. One of the great things about doing that job is I think I learnt so much about how different we really are on the surface. Even English and Americans, they seem so similar on the surface, but when you get into it, there's still a lot of nuances and differences that you don't realise until you start to dig into it. And that's kind of what made it fun for me, is just learning from these really good marketers in territories how to do things differently. Yeah, and sometimes you could take things from different markets and apply them to the US, which was another big plus for us,
the creativity. And I felt like their budgets were also more restricted.
Yeah.
And so they had to get savvy, like really creatively savvy with, what promotions they do. And also with some of the IP, the franchises, certain characters resonated more in countries, right? And that could be because of publishing the books.
Right.
It was also because of just merchandising, maybe certain toys of certain characters did really, really well. And as a result, now that character is very dominant. And so they were very clever on leveraging what is it that's working, that pre-awareness or that attachment, and heightening it. And so what we were responsible for was making sure that they were being set up to succeed and being their voice in home office, right?
Did you ever amend or edit a film to fit a market?
No, not for marketing purposes. There would be edits required for censorship. Like certain things you can show in some countries and others. But from that point of view, we wouldn't edit the movie. But we would work around it. Like Norma was saying, we'd change artwork, we'd change marketing campaigns, we'd focus on different elements of the movie to try and make it work better in those markets. Right. You touched on another really good point there about compared to the US, our budgets were fairly small. I don't think that's a bad thing, though. I mean, you see, even in filmmaking, I think it was Wes Craven who said that, a big budget is the enemy of creativity. Right. You're forced to be creative. You're forced to do things differently. And that's really exciting. I mean, that's one of the things I love about independent film is that you don't have a lot of money. So you have to think outside of the box and try and figure out ways to do things when you don't have $100 million to spend on special effects.
By the sounds of what's going on, I don't think anyone has at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Yeah.
But you will see, though, in one of the bigger movies, because it is costly to make those adaptations theatrically, but you will see in the bigger movies where, for example, maybe there's a baseball game being played, and maybe what they'll do is they'll superimpose and they'll put soccer. Right, in certain countries. So, or instead of eating, hamburger, maybe they're eating noodles. Sure. Right. So little things like that. They'll do tweaks.
But going back to what you just said about budget, so we were at the Poppy Jasper International Film Festival a couple of months ago in April. A little bit about me. My background is not from the entertainment industry, not from your side. It's the other side. So we provide, as a company, we provide home entertainment in terms of cinema rooms. I look at this as an audience member. I mean, I love film. I absolutely love film. And the films that you love, Star Trek, science fiction, my eyes light up when I see anything like that. But the point I was trying to make was we went to this film festival and we watched shorts. So they had 4 or 5 shorts, and maybe some were 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes long maximum. And they were so engrossing. Okay, now they would have been made on a small budget. There was one, do you remember the one where the Chinese one was living under the house and she'd escaped some human trafficking ring? Right. But it was so engrossing. It was like I was watching something on Netflix. It was believable. When you see something like that, you realise it's more the story and how it's acted. It's gritty. These people are so that they have no other choice other than just to act it out themselves, because they don't have special effects. They don't have loads of extras. Yeah. And I think there was 3 people in that, 3 or 4 people. But it was so believable. It was really good.
Yeah. It was. For me, I think storytelling. It's taking a hit these days. Particularly in some of these bigger movies. I mean, it's all about the effects and the spectacle, and then they forget about characters and people. And to me, you've got to have great characters. You've got to tell a good story. If people aren't moved by the people, by the characters and the stories you're telling, the rest of it, nothing matters. You see that so often now with movies that fail because they're the spectacular, throw everything at the wall kind of things, but there's no heart to them.
And then, unfortunately, sometimes then it becomes repetitive because XYZ movie did really well for the special effects. Then there's a copycat, and then it just doesn't feel like, where's the authentic? Where's the creativity? Where is really the innovation? And it is on the story, and it's the characters. So Rob, which brings me into what you're doing now. So you left Paramount. You were there for a total how many years?
Yeah, I think it was 14 years in
14
total.
years.
14 years,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow, good 14 years. And then you decided to go off on your own.
Yeah, I went off and I started a small digital agency, and we were doing sort of viral videos and online content right back at the beginning of that sort of renaissance. So, we did some really fun stuff with Fox. We worked on some stuff for the Die Hard movie, and we did stuff for Avatar and some stuff for Star Wars, and we would create these online viral videos and stuff, and that was fun for a while. But that's what sort of started gravitating more into production, really. And then, I did this web series, The Watcher, if you remember.
Yes,
Yeah,
I do remember
showing you
The
that.
Watcher.
That was the kind of first venture into original content. That did pretty well for us, actually. It was on a streaming service long gone now called Blip TV, and it was one of their top dramas for a while. After that, I moved into animation. I was working on a bunch of animated features. I worked for a company in Pasadena called Duncan Studios, who do some great work. They worked on The Iron Giant and Mary Poppins Returns and all that kind of stuff.
Were you writing, directing?
No, with that I was kind of more producing,
You were
and I was
producing.
doing a finance role as well, overseeing the budgets and all that kind of stuff.
Iron Giant was the most. Is that the one with Vin Diesel? Was the
Yes,
voice?
yeah,
Oh, what an amazing.
It was a beautiful movie. I mean,
yeah.
they didn't work on the original, but they did a director's edition where Brad Bird wanted to do some of the scenes he couldn't do originally.
Right.
Okay.
So they reanimated a lot of those scenes and brought them to life and added them into the feature. So it's just a great movie, isn't
But
it?
to go back to what you were just saying about story, I mean, my kids love that.
Yeah,
We've watched it so many
Yeah.
times, and the story in it is so good. It's funny.
yeah.
And you know what? It's not real.
Yeah.
But you're watching a cartoon, but the story it's got so much in it that
Right.
you really get drawn into it.
Right.
It was just to your point
Yeah.
before. The story's got lost.
Story's everything, and it's one
Yeah.
of I think it's one of the best animated
Absolutely.
movies ever made. I love that film. So I did that for a while, and then I ended up working for Riot Games for a while on Arcane, the animated series there.
Yeah.
And all the while I was kind of working on my own projects and stuff. And then I met a woman out of Augusta, Georgia, a lady called Amy Bailey, who had a production company called Beyond Casual Media. And so she was working on a movie, a science fiction movie with Luke Hemsworth. And the director was a mutual friend, and he asked me to come on board as a producer. And I'm like, I don't know. At that point, I was kind of getting disillusioned with the industry. And I'm like, come down.
Because you were predominantly producing at that point,
Yeah, I was
right?
producing really at that point. Yeah, it was usually finance or production, one of those two. I ended up going down there, and it was just fantastic. It was a small, independent movie, amazing group of people, great actors. The production crew were fantastic. It was one of the few sets I'd been on where people weren't screaming at each other and getting angry. Everybody had a great time. And Amy was fantastic. She just kind of ran this thing. I used to joke about her being like James Garner in The Great Escape. She's a fixer. You'd say things and things would just turn up.
I love people like that.
Yeah, but it's so funny. I mean, she was great, and we got on really well and became friends. And her and her husband run a chain of restaurants down there called Reinhardt's. But she's written scripts, she's been producing stuff, and so we ended up partnering. And so we're finishing our third movie right now, and a few more to go as well. So that was very lucky. I mean, meeting her was just like you say, you meet people that you connect with, and our skills complemented each other. The 3 movies I've written and directed with her, we did in Georgia with the same crew, and it's a fantastic experience. It's working with a great group of people, passionate about what they do, who care, who want to learn, and it's like just having a lot of fun while trying to tell great stories to entertain people.
Right.
What are the films about? What was Encounter? Was a science fiction.
Encounter was a
film?
science fiction movie. Yeah, it was about a guy who they find this thing in a field and they bring it home. Luke's character was this guy who was paralyzed in a car accident, and so this thing latches onto him and allows him to walk again, and so it's a really interesting science fiction story. We also worked with a couple of other sort of science fiction genre stars as well on that as well, which is a lot of fun. And then the second one we did was called Applewood, which was a supernatural thriller about time travel as well. It had some science fiction elements to it. Then we did a horror movie called Mr. Sleep, which is on streaming right now, if you want to watch it, which is basically, it was kind of my homage to like Halloween, those types of stories,
Okay.
mad killer on the loose kind of thing. And the one we're just on post on right now is called The Observance, which I really like. It's probably my favorite. It's a cult movie. It's about a woman who's in a car accident, and she's in a coma. When she wakes up, her husband and daughter join this weird cult. They've taken over this little community that she's in, and she's the only one who thinks something's wrong with it, and she tries to get to the bottom of it and all this kind of stuff. And it's like murder, mystery, and mayhem. Yeah. It's kind of fun. They're very diverse.
But at this time now you have your own production company, right?
Yes, we do.
And so tell me, how did you make that change and that leap to start your own company as opposed to working for others?
I was going to say it was a gradual thing, but it really wasn't. Okay. It was, I'd been wanting to do it for a long time, and just hadn't met the right people that I connected with.
Was it the people, or is it?
It really was. I partnered with some people in the past who things didn't work out, or they're not, the usual thing. People who are maybe a little dodgy and stuff, and aren't quite can't do what they say they're going to do. And that's where the point I was getting disillusioned when I met Amy. I liked about her. She's very straight talking. She's very organised, very focused. We had a similar love of movies, so it was really just the minute we met, it clicked, and we took off from there. I guess an interesting movie story. One of the things that kind of really made me take the jump from corporate to kind of do my own thing was the movie Chef, if you've seen that. The Jon Favreau movie.
Fantastic film.
I was working for this company. I was having a really tough time with them. They were, for a whole bunch of reasons. And I remember one day I was like, you know what? I'm not going to go in. I don't know what to do. I just don't want to go in the office.
What were you fed up? You were just fed up with the corporate
struggling with the corporate nonsense and the politics and all that, the rubbish, all the stuff that gets in the way of doing things. And so I was like, I ended up going to the movie theatre and I went and watched Chef. And literally I was watching that and I was like, wow, this is my whole life up here. When he's working with that
pretty
big
much.
restaurant.
He does. It goes from being in a restaurant.
Yeah, and the guys always stop in his creativity. No, you can't do that. You've got to do this because everybody likes this. Don't try anything new. Yeah. And he gives up. And I was like, okay, I have to do this. And that literally was the thing that kick-started me into making that change.
But you were feeling it, right? Even
I was
in the
feeling
corporate
it.
gig, do you feel it?
Yeah.
What'd you feel? Were you getting drawn to wanting to write, to create your own?
Yeah, they always say that you end up gravitating to an industry that you gravitating to something that you want to do, even if you're not doing it. So I think moving into movies, I love movies, I wanted to be part of it. But, I didn't have a traditional, I never went to film school and all that kind of stuff. I studied marketing and business. I didn't study filmmaking. And I never thought, I don't really have the skills to do this. And the more I kind of got into it, the more I would write and produce these little viral videos or shoot my own stuff and everything, I kind of started to get more confidence with that. And it was a combination of just like, we talked about it earlier, sometimes if not now, then when? And you've got to make that leap. And I'd become so disillusioned with corporations, particularly big corporate entertainment companies who don't care about story. They just care about money. They just care about bums on seats. Don't care about quality. They don't care about filmmaking. They care about it's a mass market.
Don't even care about the people as long as they produce.
And that that's really important to me. It's like it's I'd be on sets and you'd see people treating people poorly and badly, and you'd be in the office and see that, and it's just like more and more frustration with that. And it's like, this isn't the way to do business properly for this type of thing. You need to treat people properly and get the best out of them, not.
You empower people as opposed to berate them all the time.
Exactly.
And it's funny what you just said. How many times have people turned around and said, when we've interviewed them, that movies, there's something in a movie they saw a film and it changed their life. Yes. And like you just said, it's because it's something you see in a film. A story, as you said before, you're telling a story about something, about someone, about someone's life. And when you recognise some of your life...
When you recognise yourself on the big screen.
Yeah,
exactly. Like, hey, that's great.
You said, that's my life. It makes such a difference. When you hear something, someone says something, yeah, you know what? That's right.
Yeah.
Because someone's written that, someone's heard that somewhere.
Absolutely.
And as a storyteller, you want that. You want to move people. You want them to escape whatever it is that you're trying to do. You're trying to draw them in. And it is the power of film, the power of cinema, right?
Yeah. And we talk about a lot in the stuff that we do, where it's like, if we can make someone feel something in the work that we do, if they feel joy or happiness, or maybe they're afraid or apprehensive, or we can trigger emotion in our audience, then we've done our job.
Yes.
Right.
If they connect with it in some way, whatever that is, even if they hate it, it makes them feel something.
Right. And if they go home and talk about it and are terrified, they can't sleep, and then they have to sleep with the lights on because of the horror film that they just watched.
That's kind of cool.
It's all good. Oh, yeah, that's your favorite subject. Rich loves horror films.
No, I don't.
It's quite the opposite.
Yeah, well, my wife Trish, she hates horror movies. Like Mr. Sleep, she's like, I can't even watch this. And then when she finally watched it, she was like this for half of it.
Oh, no, really? But the name of your company. Tell us
Marvelous.
Tell us about Bloody Marvelous.
I have a project that I'm working with a friend of mine, trying to get off the ground for years actually, which is called Mach 1, and it's about the story of the land speed record.
Okay.
Richard Noble. No, Richard Noble.
Oh, Richard Noble. Of course.
So back in 1997,
Bluebird, Blackbird. What was it called?
Thrust.
That was it.
Yeah.
Thrust. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was thinking about
very odd name. Anyway.
Are you sure it's about? What sort of film are you talking
clearly,
about?
clearly a long time ago. But
Okay.
it was a really interesting story. And Dan, my friend of mine, he has the rights to the story and everything. But basically, it's a story about these group of English people, crazy eccentric English people who built this car with no money, and kind of beg, borrow, and steal this thing. They took it out to the desert here, Black Rock, over in Nevada.
Yeah.
Raced against an American team that was well funded, had millions of dollars and all the rest of it, and they ended up breaking the land speed record. They were the first car to go beyond the speed of sound. It's a fantastic story. I mean, to me, it's like the Italian Job meets Ocean's 11.
That's what came to mind when you were describing.
Didn't they have a fighter pilot, Andrew someone or other?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the guy who drove the car.
No,
Yeah, he
was
was an ex-fighter pilot.
Yeah.
He took over. Richard was originally going to drive the car, but his wife, he'd already broken the record once, but he was in a really bad accident. He nearly died, and she didn't want him doing it, and he ended up giving it over to Andy. And Andy drove this car. When you talk to them and you hear the real story, it's like, I can't believe no one's made this into a movie yet, because it is like such a great story.
Yeah.
It's a bit like Ford versus Ferrari.
Yeah,
that type
exactly.
of
It's
that
that
type of story.
thing.
Yeah.
The long and the short of it is Richard Noble, the guy who was behind the whole thing. Fantastic guy. He's like Biggles, he's like, I say, jolly good show, old chap. And his favourite saying was, bloody marvellous, bloody marvellous. That's a great name for a production company.
It's a great name for a production company, especially one of the genres that you're homing in on, which is horror.
So that's kind of how we got the
and
name.
it
It's
stuck.
great. But
Okay.
Richard Noble, was he the guy that had the Noble sports car as well? Was that a different Noble?
I think it's a different one. Yeah, he was a tailor. He sold cloth. He did all these weird things.
Yeah.
Same thing. He wasn't an engineer by trade. He kind of got into it, and then was so focused. He built this team around him, and they made this thing. He was able to kind of blag a couple of jet engines off the RAF.
I was about to say, these jet engines, didn't they?
Yeah, and he got an old fighter plane that was about to be scrapped. And great story, and he had these two guys, these two engineers work with him who were just brilliantly eccentric, and they were kind of almost. It's one of those things where if you filmed it would be Bill Nighy and Jim Broadbent, those types of characters. And the steering was sort of a three-wheeler thing with the rear wheel was the single wheel and the two wheels in front. And so they got this Mini and they welded it together to see if it's just full of that stuff. It's just like, it's such a great story.
You know what, Rob?
Crying
Even
out
just
for joy.
hearing you describe this part, because knowing you from the corporate side, you were always so creative. Like we would have brainstorming meetings, and he'd be like, "Well, what about this? And what about that?" And we'd be sitting there like, "Yeah, what about this?" And he would allow everyone to build off ideas, but you would create the environment so those ideas could be birthed.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you.
And so as we see you on this side, it's well, of course you would have been struggling with being in a box, right?
Yeah. And the more the sort of corporate culture grabbed hold of movie making, the more difficult it became, where it was a data and research groups, and it was never about creativity or art. And that sounds pompous, I know, but it's true. Movie making is still an art form. It's hard. It's about telling stories, creative stories, not manufacturing something with the committee that, oh well, this works, so we'll just copy this and template this story into something else. I love that though, and the thing about working with other people for me is that, there's no monopoly on good ideas.
No.
Everyone has a great idea, right? I mean, anyone can have it. I mean, when we're making our movies, I mean, I like to think I'm very collaborative as a director and producer. And it's like, people come up to me and say, I have an idea for this. And it's like, no, what do you say? And, in the last movie we did, the lead actress, Kate, she had this idea for this scene we were doing. And I was like, that's great. We should do that, and I love working with actors. I've always enjoyed that. And they, especially, I work with a lot of stage actors, so they tend to be very serious about it. They'll study and they'll spend time rehearsing and understanding the characters and stuff, which I love. I did a bit of stage work when I was back in the UK and here. And, that kind of time spent figuring out who the characters are and what motivates them and stuff. Like, there's one guy, Alec, I work with in all of my movies, who's just this brilliantly underrated actor. And he'll go away and he'll write me like a 2-page sheet on who this character is. He'll send me his playlist of music, and and I love that. And he immerses himself in those roles. But the thing is, it's like, my view with them is like, I've written the character on a page. When I hand it off to you, I want you to take it further. You're the one who's going to bring it to life. So tell me what you think. One of the characters we wrote, I had this idea for a backstory for him, and he came up with the complete opposite. And I'm like, you know what? That actually works. That's what we should go with. But I love that. It's so exciting to talk with creative people whatever they do, and they come up with an idea, you suddenly think, that's a great idea. We should actually make that happen.
I think when you can work when your ego is left at the door,
Yeah.
and then you can allow other people
Yeah.
to be the creatives
Yeah.
that you need them to be. Because you're right, everyone can have a good idea. Why should you not champion that?
Yeah.
If someone's idea is better than yours, why would you not go
Right.
with it?
If it makes what you're doing better, that's the only
absolutely,
important
'cause that's-
thing.
And you can build off each other's ideas,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
right?
We
Yeah.
interviewed a while ago. We interviewed Michael Grillo. Amazing guy.
Oh, yeah. He's
Amazing
a
guy.
great actor, isn't he? I like him a lot.
What did Michael say? He said it's all about the project.
Oh, it's all about
all about-
everyone who signs up working on a film. You have to be. It's about the
Yeah.
film,
Yeah.
regardless where you are, below the line, above the line, sideways. You know,
Yeah.
wherever it
Yeah.
is, it's the film.
Yeah.
You have to do it for the film.
Yeah. It really is. Yeah.
And that's what makes it different. That's what makes a great film.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It really is. And I've been lucky. I mean, we haven't worked, most of the people we've worked with have been sort of TV actors, or they're not huge stars or anything. But, you know, we worked with Luke Hemsworth on Encounter. He was great, lovely guy. You know, his agent,
Great
you know, he's a trailer and he needs this. And he never went to the trailer. He would hang out with us and we'd go drinking afterwards.
Oh, really?
And he was
Oh, so
fantastic
you wanted to
guy.
stay? You wanted to be with
Yeah,
the
wanted to be
crew.
around with the crew and the you know, everybody else.
That
And,
makes a
and
big
on this
difference.
movie, we just finished, we worked with Ted Raimi,
Okay.
who's just the nicest man ever, just brilliant. And again, he came on set and he was like, you know, I love it when he came on and introduced himself to everybody, and he would say, look, I've got this idea for this line, can I try this? And I'm like, yeah, give it a go. And he had some great ad-libs in the movie, which we kept in. You want to create an environment for people where people feel empowered to do their best work, and they're not afraid to go, hey, what about this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you stifle those ideas,
Right.
you in effect, you're stifling the project, aren't you?
Yeah.
So,
No, you are.
Yeah, and you want people to have a good time. You know, want people to enjoy. At the end of the day, what we're doing is we're not curing cancer. It's not rocket science. Blah blah blah. Cliche. But you know, we want to tell stories that entertain people, but we want to have a good time doing it. We're lucky and privileged to be in this industry.
That's important to do that.
Yeah.
Because when you cultivate that
Yeah.
culture and you're being very inclusive
Yeah.
of everyone, regardless of their title and their ranking.
Exactly.
That was one
Yeah.
thing you taught me. That's one thing I was always observing your management style, and you would bring in the coordinator, the interns. I feel like interns wanted to intern because you were
Yeah.
you were leading the marketing team because you felt like everyone had a voice.
Thank you. Yeah, they do.
And that's
Everybody
so
has something.
important.
And if they're not contributing, then maybe they're learning something. You know?
Right. Well, speaking of voices, I have a little gift for you.
A gift.
Yes. And that's because I have said this multiple times to people. And I said this, I think, to you when we were on our Zoom call, but I don't know if you realize how much your leadership affected me. So here's a little gift, because your collaboration, your inclusivity, and your creative
Oh my
spirit
God.
is something that I've carried through all my times that I've been working. And I wanted to emulate you, Rob. You really, really, really did affect me.
I think that deserves a round of applause from everyone.
I feel so Michael Scott right now. I don't know
I
what
have to
to
give an
say.
acceptance speech.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What's a little plaque say for all of our listeners?
World's Greatest Boss Award. You're the best. Thank you.
Yes, you
That's,
are the best.
I just,
You're one of those people
I
that
would
you just
say.
affect. You affected everybody. You affected
you.
everybody that entered the room. And so now to hear you venturing and doing all your films, it's like, yes, we need people like you. We need
Thank
more
you
people
so
like
much.
you creating.
I'm
Brits
just,
out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of good Brits out there. We didn't already have this conversation that they're taking over Hollywood.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no,
Wow.
thank you, Rob.
yeah, I'm lost words. Thank you. Thank you. That's really kind of you.
No, you are. I'm so excited for everything that you're doing.
Right there. Thank you. It's going to go on my mantelpiece at home.
Yes, you can show everybody.
Anytime anyone does a Zoom call with me, that's going to be in the background. You'll see
That'll
it.
be in the background. Be in the background.
Thank you so much. But-
No, you're welcome.
Do you know what? I mean, it's really nice of you to say that. And I've always tried to be like that. You know, I think one thing corporate life is very good at is teaching you how not to treat people well.
Yes.
Ooh, that's a
And
great one.
it's always been really important to me to work with people who enjoy what they do, who are passionate, and who want to learn. Like one of the things Amy and I agree on, and she's great at this as well, is that whenever we do a production, we'll have experienced crew, but we'll also bring new people on, and we'll get people from the local colleges to come and work on the film, or we'll bring people who, like on the last movie we did, we had this guy Eric. Hope you won't mind me mentioning him, but he'd been an electrician for a long time and all that, and he was wanting to do something different, and we got him to come on as one of the grips on the thing, and he was absolutely fantastic. He took to it like a duck to water. So much so, he's now working with the grip company and doing projects with them afterwards. So he'd never done it before, but we wanted to give him a chance because he really was a nice guy, cared about it, and he was so amazing. I mean, literally, we're like, this guy's... A couple of examples on the last movie, we did this. There are 2 shots in this movie that I'm really excited about. I mean, it's not the whole movie. These 2, one is a monologue that one of the characters gives, and it's about 4.5 minutes, uncut, of just him talking. And we just do this very slow push on him when he talks about when his wife was in the coma of the night, the car accident, what happened to him, why he ended up joining this cult. And I think it's a really powerful scene, but this guy, Eric, he worked the dolly. He was pushing the dolly, and he did it perfectly, first take. I mean, it's incredible. And then the other scene, which another one, it's like the biggest thing I've ever done. We did this time lapse of the main character in a coma. She's in a hospital bed, and she's all bashed up, and over the time, the bandage disappeared. And it was a single take. It was a single 60-minute take without cut. And it was like choreographing an orchestra. It was the most fun thing I've ever done like that.
Really?
Literally, watch it. Okay, doctors come in, do this, take the cast off. And we had, again, Eric on a dolly with a light rolling it back and forth to make the days look like they're going past. So this thing, it's probably a 3-minute segment when it runs at time, but it was just very cool. And he was amazing, but it was just the fact you could stand there and actually... I'd say it was like directing an orchestra. I'm standing there going, okay, wheeling this. Okay, now you have a seizure. Okay, now this is in. Husband, come in, sit down, do this. And it was just brilliant. It was just so much fun to do stuff like that. But that's not just me, that's the crew. It's everybody knowing what they have to do, everybody trying their best. It's a big achievement. I mean, I don't know, it was just a great shot. And I couldn't do that without a good team of people around me.
Right.
Well, you're putting someone from obscurity and giving them a position of responsibility.
Yeah.
Which is, if you think about one of our pillars, you paid it forward.
Yeah,
You've given something back to someone. You've given someone else an opportunity to do something. You don't know where he's going to go with his career.
Yeah.
And I think if more people could just spend a little bit of time just helping out the person behind them or person 2 or 3 back.
Absolutely.
The world will be a better place. We're not
Always.
getting too deep, but it's why is it wrong to be nice?
Yeah.
Why would you not want to help someone
Give
else?
someone a
Yeah.
break. That's
Yeah.
the other thing, because it's not only in this industry, but many industries. Oh, you have to check the box. You have to have a degree. It has to
Yeah.
be this way. You
Yeah.
have to look this way. You have to look that way. But if you have talent,
Yeah.
if you're passionate,
Yeah, passion. I'd take
is
passion over a piece of paper
There you go.
anytime.
Me too.
Yeah.
Same here. Same here. Because you can teach the other things.
Yeah.
But passion, their willingness and wanting to stay late and work hard, you can't necessarily teach someone that.
Yeah,
That comes
absolutely.
from within.
It is, and it's all about a team, teamwork and stuff. And one of the things that always bugs me about movies when it's a film by whatever the director's name is. It's not. It's a film by everybody who was part of that,
Yeah, that's
and
a
it doesn't
good
matter
point.
who it is,
That's a
right?
good point.
It could be craft services. How important that is. Having the right food and snacks around. It's the PA who's running up and down for 12 hours, getting people and doing this and making sure people are. Without any of those people, it wouldn't work properly.
Well, it's a village. It's a village that
It really
takes
is.
to
Yeah.
pull something
Yeah.
together.
Those villagers.
Those villagers, I know.
Just
They can't,
Yeah.
you can't stay hungry.
Yeah.
You have to
No.
feed them.
All the time.
And you've got to be careful because you've got to craft that team. Like anything, there are great people in that team. There are people who maybe aren't quite as strong that you have to figure out whether or not they're in the right place. And if they're not, can you put them somewhere else? And if they're not, do you have to leave them behind as you move on to the next one? So it's not easy, and it's not all cuddly. You do have to think about the good of the group. I'm saying the stuff we've been doing down in Augusta. This was our 3rd movie together, and it was really interesting. I did an interview down there with the local press, and the guy was talking to me, and he said it's interesting. He said you use the same actors, you use the same crew. He said it's like you've built a modern day repertory company. Yeah. And I'd never thought of that, and I thought, you know what, that's a really good analogy. That's exactly, and I understand now why people like. Whether it's Spielberg or Nolan or whatever, why they like to use the same people. Because they trust them and you have a shorthand together.
Right.
And if things are working well, it makes the whole thing so much more fulfilling.
Well, you have
They
their,
know you as well, don't they?
yeah, and they have their soldiers there. They know when shit hits a fan. They know they can rely on their superpowers to handle it and still keep everyone intact.
Yeah.
It's no different to what we do on a much smaller scale.
Right.
We have the same team working with us, and they're great, and they know us, we know them, and it's so much easier.
Yeah.
But Rob, why horror? Okay, I know you talked about it with your, being introduced to it, but what's the draw with horror for you?
For me,
For you.
I I think it's probably because I grew up with it, to be honest with you. It's going
At least
back
it was
to
just
Dracula.
exposure with your mom.
You know, and the films that I remember from my childhood are things like, you know, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon was a big one for me. I love that movie. You know, the wolf, the American Werewolf in London, those sorts of things. I like the genre. And I think it's really interesting because I think good horror relies on great characters. Because if you don't feel anything for the people in the horror movie, you don't care about them and it has no stakes.
Right.
But, you know, I think it's more that than anything else. But I'm really interested in characters. I like people and I like interesting characters and stories.
Okay.
And so, you know, the latest one, the Observance, the new one we're doing, does have some horrific moments in it. You know, there's a couple of like nasty things that the cult does. But it's really interesting to me about the characters and about how you take someone, you know, this woman in this example who's been in a coma, who's really, when she wakes up, everyone's against her. The town's turned against her, her husband's turned against her, her daughter hates her. And she refuses to bow down to that and just become one of the sheep. She stands up. And I think that, to me, is a really interesting story about finding that kind of courage. And also the bad guys, the two villains in this movie. Villains are always fascinating because they have, you know, nobody ever thinks they're a villain. The villains never think they're villains. They think they're doing the right thing. They're treating, you know. And so it's so fascinating. If you can create interesting characters that people connect with, then to me that's the most satisfying thing. You know.
It's interesting that you said the villain never thinks he's a villain.
Yeah.
I always think it's the opposite, but that's
I
interesting.
mean, that's why people regard them.
Right.
But most villains, they're not doing it just to twirl their moustache and do that. You know, they're doing it because, you know, they want to make the world a better place, or they're trying to do this, or and sometimes they're out for money and stuff as well. But they never regard themselves as villains. They've always got some reason to do it, unless they're
Justification.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what makes good villains really interesting. You know, that they have this depth to them where you kind of like, for example, in the cult thing, the guy who runs the church, he has this partner who's clearly a psychopath. And he's not, though. He actually believes in what he's doing. He has this conviction that what he's doing is going to change the world for the better. And that makes him much more compelling.
Interesting.
Yeah, because you see that he's got conviction in what he does. It's like, he totally believes.
And that's his truth, right?
Yeah, it's his truth.
It's just like with any human person, right? Any family members, if they,
Yeah.
even though what you're thinking, what they're doing or what they're saying is completely opposite to your beliefs, but it comes across.
Yeah.
If they come across feeling it, then you're like, wow, they really do believe
that.
it.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And I think, all these shifting perspectives are a really interesting storytelling aspect anyway.
Well, Rob, one of the things we like to do on our show is we have this box of cards of questions.
Okay.
And the questions vary from different themes, dreams, achievements, likes, dislikes, but deep. So we'd like to ask our guests to choose a card, any card.
And I can just pick one from anywhere.
Pick one, read it out loud. We give you an opportunity to answer it first, and then we will take turns answering that card.
Okay.
Question.
So the question is, when do you feel most alive? Thanks.
Oof. All right.
Do I have to answer first?
You do.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what? It's pretty easy for me, to be honest with you. I mean, outside of family and stuff like that, when I'm on a set and when I'm making a movie, that's when I feel I love every moment of that. Everything about it is just fantastic.
Aww.
Being with people, being around people, watching amazing stuff gets done, and just feeling, and also, sometimes when you're the writer as well, when you've written something, you see it come to life. And sometimes it comes to life in a very unexpected way that you didn't see, but it's better than what you saw. I love it. I love being on a set. I love being around the people that I work with on set. The cast and the crew that I work with are just the most wonderful group of people. They're like an extended family to me.
And I'm sure they feel it as well.
I hope so.
Yeah.
No,
We'll send them.
no.
We'll send them the survey later.
Yeah. Oops, sorry, shouldn't say that.
You've got one here, actually. Would you like us to read it out?
Yeah.
We asked earlier.
It's when, right? Is that the question?
Yeah, when do you feel most alive?
When I am doing the things I love, and that translates to being my most authentic self.
Yeah.
And that could be here, interviewing folks and just asking my questions, right? And the things that I would really want other people to know. Mentoring, when I'm drawing, when I'm doing me.
Yeah.
When I'm being me. I think that's when I feel like I'm alive, because I could feel the triggers and the emotions, and it's the excitement. Like I will excite myself, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Rich.
Rich?
Yeah, can we take a cut? No, I go similar to what you said. So putting a family aside, obviously, I would say I love creating. So if I'm creating something, and that's a very broad term, okay, I love it. I feel like I'm doing something. If I'm arranging something, I've never had done anything like this in 56 years. I would never, under normal circumstances, be sitting opposite you. Okay, so to be in an environment where I'm surrounded by extremely talented individuals, where I get to interview someone that's had an illustrious career in an industry like this is amazing. It's when I'm alive. It's because I'm learning. I'm looking, I'm learning, and I love it.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm in my day-to-day, you know, when I'm out there meeting people and I'm putting us forward, I love it. You know, if I'm on the edge, I'm excited.
Yeah.
And that's when I feel alive. It's just doing, I think, creating and doing.
There's definitely a theme there, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, there
yeah,
is.
yeah, I know. It's when you're creating stuff, when you're making something happen,
when
and
you're birthing
you're being
things.
true to yourself.
Yes.
You know, you're living your best life, really, and
Yeah,
you can't beat that.
No,
There's
you're-
nothing more exhilarating.
agreed.
And you're being honest, and it's almost you're honoring yourself
Yeah.
and your self-being,
Yeah.
right? We had interviewed previous guests, and when we were talking to Kwame and Shelton, for example, and they were talking about, Kwame was talking about being an actor and how it's important, you know, to read the role, but what's more important is bringing yourself in the role. You know, honoring who you are, your voice, and bringing that voice to the role, and not pretending to be someone else.
Yeah.
Right, another
Not
doctor,
censoring yourself.
exactly, or being what you think the producer or director wants from you. It's really what's your gift, right, and showcasing that.
Absolutely.
So, Rob, we would love to get your words of advice. So, at the very end of our segment here, it's almost an open mic of a lot of the themes that keep coming back over and over again with our guests is inspiring others.
Yeah.
What lessons have you learned? What are your words of wisdom that you could share to the folks that are listening?
Well, I'm qualified for that, but the thing for me, the thing that I've learned more than anything, and it's in the quote that I've mentioned before, it's just don't give up. Never give up. There's a great line from Nolan's Batman Begins, where it's like, why do we fall? So we can get up.
Yes.
And that's the thing I've learned in this is a tough industry. You know, it will beat you down. I'm starting to sound like Rocky now. yeah, it will beat you down.
Here we go.
But and it will. I mean, there have been times in my life where I've been despairing because I can't get stuff done, or I haven't been able to move forward. I haven't been able to do what I wanted to do. Some pretty bad times where, you know, things fall through, or you can't get something done, or it fails, or whatever. And it's so hard sometimes to just pick yourself up and do it. And there's that great line about we only fail when we give up. And I'd say to anyone doing anything, not just in this industry, if you believe in it and you're passionate about it and it means the world to you, it's what's in your heart, do not give up. Don't let anyone say no to you. Don't let anyone put you down. Don't let anyone knock you back. Get up, keep fighting, because if it means that much to you, keep pushing through. And that's probably the best piece of advice I could, and I've learned that, and I learned that the hard way. It's been a tough ride. It's been a really hard ride, but I know that if I would have given up at any point, and I came very close to it several times.
I mean, going back to the corporate job?
Yeah, absolutely. And even in the world of indie filmmaking, it's very hard to get anything done. It's very hard to find finance, to find distribution. When you do find distribution, sometimes it's not as good as it's made out of it. Whatever the thing is, there's always lots of people ready to knock you down and tell you why you can't do something. Just tell them to shut up and move on. If you believe in it, give it your best shot. And it may well be you get to a point where you can't do it, or you change your mind. That should be your decision and no one else's. Don't let anyone else influence you that, because then you'll regret it for the rest of your life, I think.
That's lovely. It's so true. I read a line in a book a couple of days ago, and it said, "Success is never final. Failure is never fatal." And it's similar to what you were just saying, basically. You know, just don't fear failure.
Yeah, don't fear it. You learn from it. You always learn something from it.
Yeah, fail.
Yeah, and if sometimes it was, in hindsight, maybe it was the right, you failed, but actually something better comes along.
Exactly.
You know, and I get an example for me, just showing how real it was. Like when I worked on Encounter, I was ready to walk away from the industry. I'd done with it. I was so sick of it. I was so depressed that I couldn't get anything done. I really had enough. And, you know, luckily Paul, the director, had asked me to be on this film Encounter. And if I hadn't said yes, And if I hadn't met Amy, I don't know what I'd be doing now, but I wouldn't be happy, I can tell you that much. And it's just, there are times in life when, whatever it is, and again, it's not just about filmmaking, I think it's life where, you're thrown so many curveballs or bad stuff happens to you that shouldn't and whatever, and it's so easy to give up, especially these days when everything's so negative and all that kind of. But just if you can, find it in yourself to move on, put people around you who will support you and tell you the right thing. People around you are so important. Find people who will help you and support you and encourage you and not let you give up. Yeah. And that's, that's the thing. Again, another part of it is you're not on your own. You don't have to be on your own.
I think we forget. I think oftentimes when things are hard, we think it's, we're not doing the right thing. But if we persevere, the universe is a lot more creative.
It is.
Sometimes I feel like the universe is benevolent. It does want us to be happy.
Yeah.
And I think when you're in your happy space, you never know when you're going to be given a gift.
Yeah, exactly.
And absolutely. I mean, don't you find also that if you throw negative thoughts out, you get the same back?
Yeah.
So if you just change the channel,
yeah,
look at things slightly different, ignore that, try and push it out of your mind, try and think about positive. It is going to happen. I will be able to do this.
I am that.
I am.
Yeah.
Not I'm going to or
I will.
I am.
I can do this.
I can.
Absolutely. So that's what it's worth. That's my advice.
It's worth a lot. Thank you very much.
Exactly. We're going to conquer the world. Aw, Rob, well, thank you so much this time flew by so quickly.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's quick.
Yeah, we're almost over with our time.
I can see why you're the world's greatest boss.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Well, no.
Show your daughters
I had a
how it
good
worked.
team.
Yeah.
I had a good team.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. Well, you surround yourself. Good people. Good people want to be with good people.
Right? There's another thing. It's like you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. Most people don't. They're insecure and they want to surround people that they can feel superior to. But if you surround yourself with the best people you can who will challenge you and push you, then everyone gets better. Mm-hmm. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, that ends our show.
It is, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming in.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you
so very much indeed.
Day. And cut.
Thank you for tuning in to Energist Podcast, where ambition meets achievement. If today's stories energized you, share this episode with someone who needs that spark. Stay connected. Subscribe to our newsletter at nrjmediagroup.com and follow us on social media for more powerful insights. Until next time, stay inspired, stay bold, and keep striving for greatness.
Energist Podcast is produced and hosted by Norma Garcia and Rich Reed. The incredible talent behind us. We are highly engineered and edited by Rich Evers. Our seriously creative director is none other than David H. Tanaka. Our talented music composer is Steve Devaney. Our devotion to motion graphic designer is Mike Macklin. Our very spirited technical advisor is Tracy Williams. Our amazing marketing manager, Lauren Carter. Our man of many words publicist is Josh Gershman. And introducing our producer's assistant, Blake Mealy. Energist Podcast is brought to you by NRJ Media Group.